was a very hot day, and my very cool husband was outside tearing down an old fence, getting all sweaty and smelly, which absolutely was not a problem until he came inside with that look in his eye. He was interested, if you know what I mean. And as he approached me, I could swear that whether he knew it or not, he was asking, "May we get physical, even though I stink?" Now, he wasn't asking with words, of course. He was asking with his moves. And it was so tempting for me to say yes with my moves, which I had done before, over the screaming protests of my hypersensitive nose and legendary gag reflex begging me not to. I would tell myself, hold your breath and don't you hurt his feelings. But I had started learning to see the questions inside these, oh no, what the heck is happening situations. And it was making it easier for me to know what to say yes or no to. Or in this case, not yet. This new skill was so helpful that I was practicing it every chance I could. For example, around that same time, I was quietly leaving a form of a particular faith that I had followed since childhood. And a woman said to me, "I'm going to pray you back in." Now, I saw her concern, and I also saw this question: may I control you in the name of God? Then there was the guy at the restaurant who kept saying to his wife, "You don't know what you're talking about." I saw his rudeness, and I also saw this: will you be the stupid one and let me be the know-it-all? This way of seeing came to me unexpectedly one day when I was writing a piece on being responsible, and I said out loud to myself, it would be so much easier to know what to agree to be responsible for if you knew what was really being asked, right? Well, as if on cue, a couple dozen questions came flooding through my mind, landed on my tablet. I wrote them down as fast as I could, and then I sat there, stared, stunned. I had never seen questions like this written, much less asked out loud. They were ludicrous, thoughtless, ridiculous, even dangerous, and hauntingly familiar. In fact, so familiar that by the time I finished wondering who would ask these questions and who would say yes to them, I already knew the answer. I do. You do. We all do, to one degree or another. Everyday people like us bury questions like these inside our behaviors, inside our raised eyebrows, cold shoulders, insinuations. Not because we're bad people. We're fabulous. But because we're complicated. We don't know half of what's going on inside here, right? So, we're also very clever. And that's why we don't use words to ask these questions, because we'd get a no. For example, the slacker is not going to use words to ask, may I work less and get paid the same? And the family is not going to use words to ask, may we sentence you for life as the family loser? And the abuser is certainly not going to ask, may I hurt you and blame you for it? No. They ask with their actions. I realized over time that these unspoken, ludicrous questions that I eventually nicknamed Ludi-Qs range from bothersome to deadly. And that's why they had my full attention. Now I saw the havoc they played in our lives. And it drove me to dive deeper, and I started with my own life. I asked myself, how many unspoken ludicrous questions have you asked people, even people you love? Too many. I would take them back if I could, but I can't. How many unspoken ludicrous questions have I said yes to that others have asked me? Too many. I would take every one of those yeses back if I could, but I can't. How many unspoken ludicrous questions fly back and forth around our planet every day between people and friends and families and companies, corporations, and nations, dashing hope, toppling freedom, stealing innocence, destroying the earth, discouraging, confusing, even ending us? Too many. I would stop them if I could, but I can't. However, what I can do right now today is show you and as many people as possible how to see what's really being asked in those situations where your gut tells you something's off, where nothing makes sense or you're perpetually stopped, stuck, where you sense injustice or downright badness going on. I can give you this new framework for interpreting what's really being asked so you can live in a state of ludicrous clarity. It's very simple. Here's how you do it. You describe the situation in a sentence. You flip the sentence into a question, and you start your question with will you or may I. So it's describe, flip, will you, may I. Let's practice with 3 life situations. Situation 1, the driver of the car you're in is texting. In your minds, flip that into a question and start your question with will you or may I. May I text and drive with you in the car? Now, based on statistics, that's a ludicrous question already. You can lay on the ludicrous by imagining the ramifications. Like, may I risk your life for my text? May I make my text more important than your safety? Situation 2. My partner rips on me and calls it constructive criticism. That's the sentence. Now flip it into a question. In your minds, will you, may I? May I rip on you and call it constructive criticism? That's ludicrous. You can lay on the ludicrous by thinking of the other ramifications. May I help you by hurting you? Will you mistake my meanness for encouragement? Situation 3. Your city leaders have kept you from knowing that your drinking water contains high levels of lead. That's the sentence. Flip it into a question using may I or will you. In this case, may we. May we keep you from knowing your drinking water contains high levels of lead. Absolutely ludicrous. You can lay on the ludicrous by thinking of the ramifications. May we knowingly poison you and your children? May we destine you to irreversible disease? Do you see how flipping a sentence into a question changes the dynamic? And that's because questions demand an answer. And when the question is ludicrous, it's easier to say no. Speaking of that, How do we say no to unspoken, ludicrous questions? After all, it's one thing to see them, it's quite another to know how to answer them, right? Well, it depends on the situation, who's asking, and what's at stake. Where does the question fall on the scale of bothersome to deadly? For example, if a store clerk asks you with her actions, "May I ignore your need for help?" you can brush it off. But not if it's your landlord, or your boss, or your doctor. Saying no to unspoken, ludicrous questions can be quick or take time. It's not about angry accusations or ugly outbursts. No, it's about awareness and thoughtful action. It's also about getting help with the bigger questions, especially if you're in an abusive relationship or other high-risk situation, like your job. Experience has taught me to walk the line between protection and compassion when it comes to saying no to unspoken, ludicrous questions. Protection, because I want to protect myself from the harm they can bring. And compassion, because we all do it until we know not to. So, here's the point. This is your turn at being human. And it's your yeses and nos that largely determine what that turn will be. Collectively, it's our turn at being human. We're all here together at the same time. And our yeses and nos make the world what it is and what it can become. And let's face it, the unspoken, ludicrous questions being asked around the world right now are so intense and urgent that saying yes to them can be catastrophic. Speaking of catastrophic, I've learned that the most destructive, unspoken, ludicrous questions we can ask are those we ask ourselves. May I punish you for not being perfect? Will you fit your life to someone else's comfort zone? Will you hold on to what hurts you? Will you be who you aren't? Will you resist what makes you come alive? Here's what unspoken, ludicrous questions ask us every day. May we screw up your life? No, you can't. We see you, we're on to you. What if we get really good at saying no to unspoken, ludicrous questions? And what if we stop asking them? We can, we must, and now's our chance. I am 74 years in the making, with enough shining moments and shit shows to confirm to you that how well you see and say no to unspoken, ludicrous questions can make or break you. You smart, talented, lovable darlings of what can be.